Okay, in this lesson we're going to talk about respect. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, just like Aretha Franklin said. Now, respect it's a hard get. That's because it has to be earned through actions and demonstration. You see people all the time running around yelling, you can't disrespect me, you can't disrespect me. Well, yes, I can, because you have no credibility. That's why I'm able to disrespect you. And for the most part, we try to go through our lives being respectful to other people, and unless we're actually in our car driving down the freeway, then we have a tendency not to respect anybody except what's in front of you. Now, respect has mobility. Once people respect you, no matter where you go in that group, that respect follows with you. Respect, as I said before, is also a hard get. Respect will keep others in their place because you have credibility, you have respect, and they don't, regardless of where they are in the pecking order of an organization. If you have more respect from your peers, that's going to overshadow what they're doing. And you have to remember that respect is the gift you give yourself. Now here's an example. I served in a military unit with an excellent colonel, and he was personable, he was involved in your career, and was a great mentor. And come to find out later at his funeral, he was a highly decorated soldier. And if you ever saw the movie They Were Soldiers Once and Young, his first combat action in Vietnam was the Ashaw Valley. Now another example was a guy I worked with in California. His name was Donald. And Don was a great manager and highly respected. Now, he didn't have an MBA from Harvard or Stanford or any of the big Ivy League schools, but he was a great leader. In fact, I would go to Don and I would ask him, hey, I want to do such and such. What do you think? And he would tell me, go back, come up with 3 plausible solutions to the problem, and we'll discuss them. So I came back, a couple of days later, and I told him, well, here's solution 1, 2, and 3. And then he looked at it and he said, which one do you like the best? I said, well, Don, I like number 3. And he goes, go for it. And as I got up to leave, he said, just remember, you're responsible for the outcome. And because he had a nurturing mentor about him, we highly respected him. And what was great is we never did anything to embarrass him because we respected him so much. And so we actually looked out for them. So once you gain the respect of your peers, they will look out for you. So stay with us as we explore more of the indispensable employee. In this lesson, we're going to talk about respect. And as we said before in the video part of this presentation, respect is something that has to be earned, but it gives you great mobility. One example I want to use is Winston Churchill. Now, for those who don't know, Winston Churchill was born into a very well respected and established English family. He went to some of their finest schools, including Sandhurst, the British equivalent of West Point or Annapolis, and then he decided he wanted to go into journalism. And he found himself as a journalist in the Boer War. That was the war between the South African Dutch and the South African English. And he was captured, escaped, and somehow in his exploits was able to get dispatches back to the London Times. And they tracked the exploits of young Mr. Winston Churchill as he stayed one step ahead of the Boers, and he eventually got back to England. Now, on his arrival back to England, he decided to go into politics because he had this reputation. And he did very well in politics, and eventually he became the first Sea Lord. This is the American equivalent of the Chief of Naval Operations. So again, here's a hard get. And he had great ideas and things along that line, but he let his, I guess what you say, he believed his own publicity, as they like to say. And he pushed forward a plan to invade the Dardanelles. This is the little isthmus between Turkey and the European continent, and it turned into just a hellacious slaughter of Australian and New Zealanders. And it caused Winston Churchill to fall out of favor to where he had to resign from political life. So for the next 10 years, he was in the abyss, in the wilderness, so to speak, of political life. But he noticed the threat of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. Now, no one was listening to Winston because he was out painting pictures and building walls, but he kept talking about the threat of Germany, the rearmament. Now, at the same time, Neville Chamberlain was trying to negotiate with Hitler, and this is another lesson about why you never negotiate with people who have no intention of negotiating. And he came back to England and he said, here in my hand, I have this paper that represents peace in our time. And then a year later, Germany declared war on Britain and World War II started. So Winston Churchill came back into power as Prime Minister and remained Prime Minister for the duration of the war. Now, Winston Churchill had a lot of respect from people because he was a great orator. He came up with some of the most famous lines of World War II, or quotes, I should say, of World War II. The most famous being about the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain, where he said, "Never in the course of human conflict have so many owed so much to so few." And he also talked about how Britain at the darkest hour would fight them on the beaches, would fight them in the city streets and in the villages and on the hillsides, but we will never, never surrender. And so this rallied the British people to the point where eventually, with Americans and all the other allies, they defeated the Germans in World War II. Unfortunately, right after World War II, England had their first general election and he was soundly defeated. But the respect that Winston Churchill had was significant. He could go any place in the world, people knew who he was, and he was always highly respected until the day he died. So when you look at respect, try to identify some people that you relate to as far as having a great sense of respect where it's projected. It could be Mother Teresa, could be a former president of the United States, could be a church leader or something like that, and try to find out what made those people respectable. And that'll be one of the lessons assignments as we look into further lessons on the indispensable employee.